What up, everybody? Stan Smith from On Sharp K9, and we got
David Everett from Odd Dog Obedience.
And today we're going to be talking about what we went over for the last 2 weeks with my man. He came all the way from
Tennessee, Chattanooga.
Oh, yes. So first things, what did you learn?
Don't get bit.
So, as you saw on the episode last week, we were going over some decoy stuff, and we were telling them, and Jamarcus and David both, and they were like, well, what did we do right? And I'm like, you didn't get bit. And it was a joke at the time, and then it actually came into fruition where I ended up getting bit. So, he understood why I kept saying it was a good thing that you did not get bit. Because when you're working with these dogs, when you're doing these kind of things, when you're getting close to being inside of a dog's mouth, when you're teaching them to use their mouths, you might get bit. So, Jamarcus had a couple of questions. What questions did you have for him, Jamarcus?
Well, actually, you're the one supposed to be talking to him, but the question is, hey, what have you learned? What's the top 3 things that you've learned over the past 2 weeks being with Stan?
I think number one, most importantly, is to get out of my own head and get out of my way. I was having a lot of problems with that before I came out here, and him and Trevor both made it a big point. Just get out of my own head, get out of my way, and it'll be a lot easier. Secondly, learn to read the room, learn to be quiet and just take things in, listen, soak it all in, be a sponge. Thirdly, really expose your dog to things early on. People, places, and things, guys. The more exposure and the things you can do with them, the more confidence your dog is going to have, and the more willing they're going to be, the more willing they will be able to try, or goodness gracious, the more willing they will be to try new things. If you teach your dog from an early age that you have its back, that you're not going to let it get hurt or get in trouble, then they're going to want to do things for you a little bit more.
And what's one thing training-wise that you're really going to take away from these past 2 weeks as well, too?
Take my time. Be patient. Do not rush things. If we try to rush things, then we're not going to get the dog that we want. So if we take our time and be patient, then you're going to get the dog that you want.
Gotcha. And what are some things that you want to comment on as far as his progress thus far, and the things that you feel like you probably could have done better to help better guide him in the future?
I mean, I think I did a swell job, so I mean, we're not going to go there now. Just like he was saying, the patience thing, but you got to make sure you balance it out with enough pressure to push the dog forward, because you don't want to stay in the same spot. And we had talked about that yesterday. We were doing some stuff with this female, and she's a little weird about getting on wobbly surfaces and stuff like that. So we had a Basu ball, and we wanted to get her to basically put all 4 of her feet on there. He got her to do the first 2 feet, and he was like, hey, should I stop? I looked at the dog, I looked at him, and I was like, well, if you were working with somebody else's dog, I probably would say you stop, come back, and then you can build on that. But since it's your dog, you know how much pressure you can take with or she can take. You know how much you can push her before it's too much, and it's your dog, so you have the benefit of having that dog for your whole life. So if you do need to go back and spend some more time building it up, you can. So you got to find that balance between being patient and being excited. So I think that would be one of the main things we took away, that you just got to work with the dog that's in front of you, really.
What do you think? What do you feel are some things that he probably could also work on moving forward to help better his program?
Like he was saying, you got to make sure you talk to the people that are in front of you. So there's certain people you can be like, yeah, smack the dog when they do something wrong. And then there's certain people where you're like, hey, did you ever get spankings when you were younger? Try to find out a way that you can say the dog needs a correction without saying, hey, you need to actually correct this dog. Because some people will put a wall up and they won't hear anything else you got to say just because you worded it incorrectly or you said a word that they weren't too comfortable with. Like he was using pressure. And I was like, hey, instead of pressure, try using encouragement. He's like, ooh, that lit a light bulb. And it's the same thing like you guys do for us. We'll say something and he's like, Stan, say it this way. It sounds a little better. It sounds a little easier. And there's certain people where you have to make it more intense for them to understand because they don't want to be soft on their dog or they don't want to be too easy on their dog, and you just have to make them understand it. So communication is key, like everything we always say. So
Gotcha. And then also, so going back to everything that you guys have learned thus far, over the past 2 weeks, and then, what I would say, what's one thing that you felt that, maybe even him, even being as a teacher, that he could probably maybe done a little bit better?
I'd say, he does a really good job about explaining things and why they're done, but I think maybe in certain instances, I can't really pinpoint one right now, but, maybe break it down a little bit better for the client and or for the dog.
And how so?
I just asked about like a loose leash walking, and I feel like he could have broken that down a little bit better. He did a good job of explaining it, but I feel like from my standpoint, obedience side, it could have been explained a little bit better, whereas he was explaining it from the protection side.
Gotcha. And see, and that's why we do this, people. We get this type of feedback, because those little things we've been talking about for weeks now. Simplifying the process, right? Simplifying this process so that a 5-year-old can understand it, so that people can really get out there and take everything that you guys are learning and then applying it to their own dogs. Because not everybody's going to do some of the things that we do, but there are some basic things that I think, when getting a basic understanding, that we can always simplify for the people out there, so they can help better their dogs. So, is there anything else you want to add before we get out here and start working with these dogs to apply some of the stuff that you've learned this week?
Not right now.
Stay sharp, my friend.
There we go.